This episode of The Construction Record is brought to you by the Ontario Sewer and Water Main Construction Association. Clean water is everybody's business.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 65 of the Construction Record podcast. This is Vince Versace, National Managing Editor of the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce, joining you today. As I kick off here, episode 65, I want to mention a piece of good news that I've hinted to on and off over the last few episodes about a big announcement that I wanted to share with our listeners and our readers. And that announcement is this, that the Construction Record podcast is going to be a supporting podcast at Con-Expo Con AGG in Las Vegas, March 10th to the 14th next year. Once again, yes, the Construction Record podcast, your podcast that you take the time to listen to and provide us feedback on, is going to be in Vegas. We're going big time. We're going to be at North America's largest construction show. It'll be Warren Frey, digital media editor of the Journal of Commerce office, and myself down in Vegas to tell the construction stories that we can find down at this massive show. We're honored and we're privileged to have been asked to be a supporting podcast for the show. We've never been, both Warren and I, so we're very excited about that. We're excited to bring our podcast down there. We're excited to represent our company, Construct Connect, down there. And we really look forward to talking to the folks of the industry at a North American scale. And that's what we look forward to. We look forward to telling the stories of construction, not just from that Canadian angle, but also from the American lens, from the Mexican lens, from whoever we talk to down there. So we're going to have quite the lineup of guest speakers. We'll be talking about the work we're going to be doing at the show and talking about the show in the lead up to it. It is March 10th to the 14th of next year. So as a supporting podcast, we definitely want to support the show and fulfill the excitement and interest that we can deliver and bring to it. So if you have any questions about it, please do email editor@dailycommercialnews.com. If you want to know a bit more about the show, you can go to ConExpoConAGG.com. So that's ConExpoConAGG.com. That's the website for the show. There are going to be over about 2,000 exhibitors at the show if you're not familiar with it. And there's going to be a lot to see and do there. If you're attending, and for us and Warren and I, though we'll be working it, we plan to take in as much sights and sounds of this massive show. You can save 40% on show admission when you register by January 17th. So that's key to remember if you're planning to go down there and be exposed to all the major players in construction in North America. The time is now to get registering because you can save 40% when you register by January 17th. Once again, that's ConExpoConAGG.com is the website, and you can find more information about the show. You can ask us if you have any questions, and stay tuned. We'll be teasing out some feature interviews leading up to the show, and we can't wait to get started on everything that has to do with ConExpo ConAGG. So with that, I'm going to move on to some of the local news that's been keeping us of interest here in Ontario. It's been a pretty active couple of weeks since we last spoke, but in particular, I have about 4 little news items that I want to share with you that I find that are of interest and that we should be aware of as the Ontario construction industry. One of them has to do with 3 electrocution incidents in a 24-hour span here in Ontario on September 19th. It's been considered Black Thursday in some circles, what happened that day, because unfortunately 2 workers lost their lives in those incidents, and another 2 were injured. All separate incidents, 3 separate incidents in a 24-hour span, all having to do with contacting overhead wires. Don Wall dug in and spoke to some of the authorities that are involved in putting out the safety message here in Ontario. So he talked to Ron Kaluski, Ontario's Chief Prevention Officer. He talked to the Electrical Safety Authority, Dr. Joel Moody from there, and kind of explored how this pretty much is an aberration. What happened on the 19th is of a concern, because, it may seem like a fluke that so much happened in one day, because typically there's only 2 incidences in a year of electrocution deaths in Ontario, typically. To have that much happen in one day is a bit alarming. One of the common threads that came out in Don's story is when incidents like this happen, it usually has to do more with construction companies and construction workers that are working in and around overhead power lines versus utility and power line workers and firms who have that type of safety due diligence drilled into them. So please take the time to find that story on our website at dcnonl.com. The headline was 3 electrocution incidents in 24 hours spark alarm. Further, as it concerns developments in Ontario, there's 2 announcements from the province that caught our eye, which we shared with our readers. One of them is that Ontario appointed advisors, 2 advisors, to help modernize trades and apprenticeship here in Ontario. These 2 advisors are called Training and Skills Advisors, and they're going to lead consultations with industry and stakeholders and provide recommendations to make the system more efficient and easier to use. The 2 fellows that were selected are people that we're familiar with and that we'll probably have here on the podcast in the future to talk about their work and some of their past work. One of the advisors is Andrew Pariser, Vice President of the Residential Construction Council of Ontario, ResCon, for those of you that are familiar in those circles. And the other advisor is Adam Melnick. He's a Director of Government and Community Relations for the Heat and Frost Insulators and Allied Workers Local 95. Those of you that are familiar in skilled trades advocacy and apprenticeship advocacy may be familiar with Adam as well. He has a great podcast that explores the issues of apprenticeship and skills trade training and inspiration. So we wish them well in this position, and we look forward to reporting on their findings and their work. So if you want to find out more about that announcement, please come to our website at dcnonl.com. Once again, that headline is Province Appoints Advisors to Help Modernize Trades Apprenticeship System. And then there was another announcement from the province of Ontario, which is of interest to the construction industry. They announced that a new advisory panel is going to be created to provide advice on a broad range of construction sector issues. This announcement came from Minister of Labour Monty McNaughton. He says that this construction advisory panel will meet with the minister 3 times a year. Interesting. Those of you that have been in Ontario construction for a while do remember larger groups that were built, some that had worked with former Minister David Kaplan when it came to infrastructure and construction issues. So it's interesting to see Minister McNaughton picking up this idea of having kind of relevant and meaningful discussions with the industry. So we look forward to seeing how that's going to shape up as far as the panel. The Ministry Labour says that the panel is going to be made up of between 8 to 12 members with representation from both labor and employers with the following composition. At least 1 employee or employer representative from the ICI sector, at least 2 employee or employee representatives from the 6 other sectors of the construction industry, and at least 2 employee or employer representatives from industry labor groups, employer groups, or associations. Who gets picked and why is of interest, and we'll be following that as it moves forward. And one of the last notes I just wanted to share from the Ontario perspective, it has to do with us, the Daily Commercial News. Those of you that are familiar with us know that we have been the Bible, the staple of this industry since 1927, providing construction industry news and project intelligence to the industry. Part of what we provide to the industry is also a service in which certificates of substantial performance can be published. And we're always looking to modernize the delivery of all our products, including our newspapers, and so that's why there's been a recent major investment in our websites, in newsletters, and social media, in this podcast. And we've taken that innovation to the next step as far as the submission of CSPs, Certificates of Substantial Performance. As of October 1st, we unveiled an online submission tool for CSPs. So now folks in the industry that need to get a CSP published can do it faster and easier than they used to do it before. and they can do it in the one publication that both online and in print has the most reliable, most authoritarian view and into the industry. We have been doing this since 1927 and know how to do it really well. We have always been in compliance. We've always delivered the goods for this industry, and we will continue to do so with our online submission tool for CSPs. We're not going to let down this industry as it modernizes itself, and we're going to modernize our tools that we help serve it, that help serve it. That is our responsibility, and we take it seriously, whether it's from an editorial point of view, project data point of view, or from delivering CSPs. We all understand that prompt payment has become a growing priority in Ontario construction, and we most recently saw that in the new amendments to the Construction Act, which take effect October 1st. We know that CSP advertisers are often up against the clock to publish their certificates and notices under the Act. So as that trusted publisher of certificates and notices, we take that very seriously. It was important for us to help our advertisers in a way that we can help fulfill their legal obligations and complete their paperwork faster. So go to our website and you will see the online submission tool for CSPs. We will provide the support for you if you need it as far as how to use that tool, but it's very user-friendly. You have control now as far as submitting that CSP and getting it turned over and published. You'll now receive your proof of publication by email immediately upon publishing the CSP instead of having to wait for a mailed copy from us. That's another side benefit here from our innovation as far as this tool. So there you go. I tend to not talk about the project data and business side of our business. I always want to talk about editorial with you. But in the end, the DCN is here to serve the industry. We've been doing it since 1927. We do it well. We're in compliance. We have an authoritative voice into the industry. We are reliable. And we want to continue to do so and be that for this industry. So with that, we have a few interesting interviews and discussions to add on to this podcast. And I wish you well until we speak next time. Thank you.
This feature interview is brought to you by the Greater Toronto Sewer and Water Main Contractors Association, building water and sewer infrastructure excellence since 1957.
We're here at the Mechanical Contractors of Canada conference in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm here with
Pierre Boucher, MCAC CEO.
And
Jack Bavis, MCA Canada President.
And my first question is, why Nashville in particular?
Well, it's a conducive place to be. It has become quite popular for organizations to come here and have their conferences, so we wanted to investigate that, and when we were satisfied that that would be a good place to come and have a successful conference, it determined that location.
And the panel I was on, the contractors panel, they had a local contractor.
They did,
yeah.
Yeah.
And so you get some of that as well. You get their view.
Absolutely. And you know, wherever you go, location is always a major reason why people want to go. You know, you can have the best program possible. Wherever you go, we'll add additional attendees if you select a place like this. It has a lot to offer.
What trends are you seeing that you've sort of flowed into the sessions? Like what, like for instance, the contracting panel we're on, that was one trend, but there's other stuff that we just walked out of a tech event. What have you introduced to this year's conference that sort of has flowed from the trends you're seeing happening in the industry?
Well, number one, I think that a major reason why people want to attend conferences is the networking opportunities that they have. You can have a session like this morning on the Contractor Challenge and tomorrow on the Innovation Challenge. They go to that and then they talk about it. And then they come up with some solutions or ideas or some need to further discuss those topics. And so it provides us with an opportunity to follow up on this, hear what they have to say, can create a need for the industry associations to get involved on those topics a little more. So it provides a bit of a guidance for us to move forward on some of the issues as well, for sure. And it's by facilitating a dialogue amongst them that you get this.
And what are some of those issues? Like prompt payment obviously is one of them, because that was hashed over in great detail in the panel I was in, but other ones, just industry-wide stuff that you guys see.
Well, like in the meeting this morning in the panel discussion, all us contractors have the same problems, right? I got a problem, this contractor got a problem, this contractor, we all have the same problems. If I find a solution to that problem, we come to these conferences and that, and I'll say, yeah, I had that same problem last year, and this is what I done. So I'm able to pass it on to the other members that, you know, like what worked for me could probably work for you, or you may find a different solution to pass on to the next guy. So it's networking and helping each other out and resolving a lot of the problems that we do have in the industry today.
And what are some of these problems, though, like that you guys are dealing with?
Well, number one is getting paid, and of course that's why we collaborated to get prompt payment. And we discussed some of that this morning, and one of the instances was, I think someone said that they don't get the contracts in time, right? And you're on site and you're after working probably a couple of months now, and you send in to get paid, and they say, but we can't pay you, you don't have the contract signed. But you never got the contract over until last week, you know, but we still expect to be paid, the work is done, you know? So that's the kind of stuff we run into.
Two major topics discussed this morning. One is downloading of risk,
Right.
Whereby you would have trends taking place where unforeseen conditions or pre-existing conditions you become responsible for it as a trade contractor, because that may be the area where you provided your skills on the project. And so that's not acceptable. But by having the discussion, people scratch their head as to that's still happening, or how did that happen? Another one is that trade contractors, in the world we're in, with the BIM approaching, there is more pressure put on trades for them to help in finalizing design. Well, where's your liability? How do you get paid? What's the provisions in your contract for you to satisfy yourself that you're doing the right thing, the right time, with the right people, and ensuring that you're covered? And so these things happen, and people sit down and they're being pressured to get that level of design, and they say, well, I'm not comfortable, but I guess I'll have to do it if I want to stay connected with this project. So these are the kinds of things that they want to discuss and see how we can address that through provisions in contractual documents where it can be integrated or added to the documentation.
Another thing that was addressed in the Build Force panel was that there's this big labor shortage, but mechanical contractors more than other people are addressing this properly. So maybe you could tell me how you guys are addressing the labor shortage.
Well, we're addressing it. First thing is that we're a major trade in the projects being done, and so we have to be very proactive early on. How we're doing that, we're having a new program to attract more women in our industry and show them that they have a lot of opportunities and possibilities for them to have a wonderful career. Indigenous people is another group that we need to engage. And so we've already undertaken some activities, and there'll be a lot more moving forward, for sure.
The other thing is like we have to get into the schools, into the high schools, and say that, because university is not for every kid. Every parent wants their kids to go to university. But I mean, there is trade schools out there, and there is a fine living to be made at this industry. So yeah, like we have to get into the schools, the high schools, to talk to these kids to say that there is a good living in the mechanical industry, or even electrical industry as far as that goes. We need all the parents, like I said, want their kids to attend university, but sometimes university is not for these kids, and lots of times they're much better working with their hands than they are with their minds or whatever. So that's another way that we could.
What plays in our favor right now as well is that we have for many decades put a lot of resources in trying to attract people to our industry, but now innovation. Kids today are attracted by doing things differently than what we've been doing in the past. So now you have robotics, you have 3D design through BIM, and you'll have different ways of being able to do things in modular in some respect. So there's new trends that might attract them. So we'll see how they respond to that. But we have basically a new modern message to share with them, and be proud of everything that this industry builds that provide us with the kind of lifestyle and comfort that we have.
One other question I have is that we have an election coming up in a few weeks, and what have the various parties been saying right, and what have they been saying wrong or not saying at all you think should be addressed?
Well, they're politicians, so
well, yeah, there's that.
you know how they're going to play that out. But there's two asks that we currently have. One is that we need to attract, as we just discussed, as many people as possible. So in terms of apprenticeship, if you're a young father with a family and you had a career that didn't work for you, and you're now considering us, so we would like to have better tax credits for them to be able to work. As they work and do apprenticeship, we would like them to have abilities to not be taxed on your income tax for those extra hours, or be deducted on your EI if you're receiving EI. And we also want to double the government what they can deduct from their wage right away before they got into finalizing their income tax report. The other one is that in terms of promotion, the government, I think, had committed some $6 million for the promotion of trades. We would like them to spend $6 million but, every year for 5 years. That would be $30 million. And that's very important. What we tell the government is that because climate change is all on their platform right now. And so for us to be able to mitigate as much as possible from our industry, the performance of our buildings, so the use of energy, and also, you have to renovate a lot of the built environment already. And it's not by just replacing what you have now that will achieve that. So what we're saying is that in retrofits, we need to move forward and beyond that. But to do this, there'll be new equipment, new processes, no sensors, and all that kind of stuff. And you have to have a skill set to be able to enable that. And so we tell government, if you want to have an impact, positive impact on climate change, you have to turn to this industry, and with the right people and the right equipment, we can create a big, we can have a big impact on that.
And I imagine that ties into the labor shortage, because you're going to have younger people who are better informed with tech and green stuff.
Exactly.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
And did you have any other issues you think the government, not just the government, any of these parties, should they be government, should be tackling?
Not right off the top of my head, I can't think of anything, but what Pierre brought up is a good thing, the government got to start putting some money into this type of industry in order to get the younger kids to go into these trades and that, and to be able to do the work that they want to do the retrofit and to make everything green,
Yeah, well, maybe one last point I think that needs to be made is that the government has spent and will continue to spend a lot of money on innovation, but it's okay to use labs and all kinds of other ways of achieving that. But again, research centers don't commercialize innovation, and they don't integrate it in the way that they do business. So what we're asking government is that whenever they think about innovation, they have to put the contractors or the businesses as a leadership role, because if it's just to come up with some solutions, if it's not integrated in the way that we do things and procured in such a way that it will be integrated in what we do, it's not going to be successful. And so what we've always asked the government in terms of construction innovation is that start with the industry, they know what their needs are, and they know how to commercialize it. And they'll be happy to work with labs, private labs, public companies, as well as research centers.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Up next, staff writer for the Daily Commercial News, Don Wall, has an interview with the Ontario Minister of Infrastructure, Laurie Scott, and Infrastructure Ontario President and CEO Aaron Corey, who unveiled the government's new pipeline of P3 projects worth $56 billion in Toronto on September 10th, and then sat down with Don to give more detail. So without any further ado, enjoy.
So it's been 2 years since there has been an update. I wonder, and so obviously a new stream of projects. Is there anything else that we should be aware of? The fact that it's been 2 years, any change in priorities or in the way P3s will be delivered? You talked about a change in analysis of some types of projects, risk management, and changes in procurement. So besides the pipeline itself, what else should we know about the way these projects will be delivered?
Well, Minister, do you want to talk? Maybe I'll let the Minister go first and talk about the extra that's taking the year, and then I can talk about the pipeline.
Okay, sure. So you're right. This has been a while since the pipeline was out. Much anticipated pipeline today. So we had to take stock, of course, as one first gets in, make sure the priorities are aligned, working with Infrastructure Ontario and Ministry of Infrastructure and all the ministries involved to see which projects were prioritized. So we wanted to make sure that these were the projects we are committed to and going forward. You saw that today in 32 projects, plus the 11 in planning that just haven't reached stages yet that we can transfer the list. But it's very, I think, well thought out and sourced needs for infrastructure for Ontario. And, it's historic investment that we are making, not only, of course, the marquees are the transit here, but certainly across other healthcare sectors and justice sectors. So it has been, totally worked up by our offices and the ministries involved to get a committed, dedicated plan. And I'll let Aaron take over from there, if that's okay for you.
No, I would just add, Dawn, in terms of what's on the pipeline, what's below the surface that you can't see. The word innovation gets thrown around a lot, and it means different things to different people. But we are in a journey of constantly improving and changing our model. So even when you see on the chart something that says DBFM, okay, we've done DBFMs for a decade in this province, but every one we are learning from the past. We're learning it's a DBFM, but we need to have a better way of sharing the risk on utility relocation, which is a big deal when you do a transit project. So although the pipeline might look very similar, I think there's a lot going on under the surface in how we create a risk model that works well for the market. One of our obsessions right now is actually, rather than talking about risk transfer, how do you think about risk reduction? Because transfer is about do you take it or do I take it? If we eliminate it, we don't have to have that discussion. And so how do we do early works, for instance, is a big part of our discussion. So when I mentioned the Ontario line, it's on the pipeline, it's one row, but underneath that are a dozen early works projects. Could we accelerate the project and de-risk the project by moving a bridge or widening a bridge, moving some utilities, getting early work done that speeds things up but also takes out risk for the eventual partner. So that's what you don't quite see underneath the surface, I would say.
Okay. I would like to talk about it in terms of your government's commitment to fiscal responsibility. This is an expansion. A lot of the hospitals only came along for the first time in 2017 that we saw. Now there's an expansion of that. Could you say, how does this fit in with that imperative to make sure that taxpayers' needs are taken care of? And also, were there any things that were shifted around or that didn't make the cut or that have been reduced that it's not apparent from the previous pipeline that due to this need to be fiscally responsible?
Well, obviously, we made this historic investment, so we set priorities. How do we make Ontario not only open for business, but obviously it's record of using the P3 model and having great success with it, driving innovation, getting projects done at a faster and more accountable pace. So there's certainly transit is the marquee. What we say are the transit projects, and then the other sectors. So when we look at healthcare, and you mentioned the hospitals and the need, we all know where our population is and our aging, so we looked at those priorities. How do we best get to that spot of making those facilities available as soon as we can to meet the needs of the province? And when we're saying we're making all these historic investments, there's thousands of jobs that are going to be created, lots more investment that's going to come to the province of Ontario. It will be the economic engine where it once was. We're going to take it back to that. So I think it's a watershed moment for the province of Ontario in respect to infrastructure and what we can attract with these new builds. And so, times have changed. We're looking at how we can do things better. This is where the innovation, the P3 models come in. They are the means for us to meet our infrastructure needs that the people of Ontario need. So goods moving, people to hospitals, jobs that are created. It is a generational and a watershed moment in the province of Ontario on infrastructure. And Aaron can maybe speak to some of the projects that there's 13 new projects on this?
14 new from the last pipeline 2 years ago, plus the 11 in the planning.
11 in planning. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
no,
what I told you before.
I think you said it perfectly, Minister. It really is. If you think you have to view infrastructure is an investment. It's an investment in building an economy and in meeting needs like hallway medicine. So at Infrastructure Ontario, we get excited about building and maintaining infrastructure, but we try to never lose sight of why we're doing it. We have a partner in every one of our projects, whether it's a local health board, Metrolinx. So our view is always remember why we're doing it too. And so, yeah, these are investments.
I just wanted to talk about the procurement of, one more question. Yeah. The procurement of on the On-Corridor project. Mm-hmm. I know there's a tremendous amount of consultation going on. It's an exciting phase, and so the four proponents are now preparing proposals. You're working with them, and you've got one. I wondered. So how's that procurement going and the consultation? there are two different sciences of two different sources of energy, even it's undetermined. Is that on track to be done in a timely manner, given that it's so widely varying, ways that the package will be delivered?
The On-Corridor project is such a unique one for us because it is a major capital project. It's billions of dollars of investment across the GO network, stations, tracks, electrification of some technology. So there's a huge, but it's actually even more than that. It's about a service change. It's about getting to two-way all-day service. So the winning bidder for Encore, very different than if you picture a classic Ontario P3 of the past. It's a really big construction project with a 30-year maintenance term. Encore is actually a 30-year operating and maintenance contract with a construction project. So the emphasis is quite different. And so that's required us to innovate in the way we evaluate bidders and what we're looking for. And for sure, it has opened up the window for innovation. You gave a great example. Energy source, for economics and speed reasons, forgetting even environmental benefits for a second, but just for the actual running of the service, you need to have electrified trains. But how you get there is absolutely up to the bidder. So we've designed a process different than in the past that is very open to innovation. The answer to your question, it's on schedule. Yes, different bidders are looking at different solutions, we understand, and that's great because it's a great example of what the minister talked about, bringing the best thinking from around the world to solve an Ontario challenge.
Yeah.
Thanks
Good.
very
Thanks a
much.
lot for taking the time. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.